Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 2 of Western political philosophy, where we'll be discussing about Aristotle. And you might have already read about Plato. So Aristotle is the biggest critic of Plato. So let's dive into the chapters. So we'll be reading about Aristotle's life and works of Aristotle, his influence on his life by Plato, and his perspective of theory of state, classification of governments, what is ideal state to him, and classification of constitutions, and Aristotle's views on slavery, status of women, citizenship, property, and the most important one is justice and revolution, and will summarize his contributions to Western political philosophy. So Aristotle is considered as father of political science. So before going to that, Aristotle was the noblest and the finest student of Plato, and he's the first and the best Platonist you'll ever come across. And he's well versed in various disciplines like physics, then ethics, politics, then biology, botany, metaphysics, etc. So, if we consider why is he known as father of political science, because Plato is known as father of political philosophy, you should not get confused between these two. You have to be very perfect with your vocabulary in political science, especially. So, why is he known as father of political science? As we consider, Aristotle is an realist and he's a moderate, whereas Plato is considered as idealist and radical. And Plato's theories are based on ideals, but Aristotle's theories are based on the experiences of human beings, experiences of history, and the comparisons between various research methodologies. So also Aristotle works are till date very famous because his studies are originally based on research accumulated or alongside with the education. Okay, so Aristotle made contributions to Greek philosophy, logic, metaphysics, maths, physics, botany, and biology. You all know. He's also known as father of logic because his theories are based on experiences rather than ideas or ideals like Plato. And he developed system of reasoning through questioning and scientific data. And also he rejected Plato's theory of forms. We all know in the previous chapter or previous lesson that Aristotle's biggest critic of Plato's theory of forms, because Plato's theory of forms says that some entities can exist independent. Uh, Plato says that some entities cannot exist independent. They are the idea of the other worldly things. But Aristotle says that the properties can exist independent of the objects themselves. It is the object that matters, not the idea, as per Plato. So next, get into his life and writings. Okay, he was born in 384 in Stagger and Aegon Sea, and at the age of 18, he joined Plato's academy and stayed there until Plato's death. So most of his life, he grew up looking at Plato's theories, Plato's lectures, and Plato's analysis through dialectical methods. Once Plato was dead, after Plato's death, he had to leave the academy because Aristotle thought he would be given a better position in the academy, but rather the opposite was done because he was still depositioned to be a floor member. Okay, so in that he was dissatisfied and he left the academy. Then he became a tutor of the Alexander the Great, the later Alexander the Great, but the young Alexander. And also, interestingly, Plato also set up a school, Lyceum, in 335 BC to preach ideas, thoughts, and philosophy. So we all know that he wrote on metaphysics, ethics, politics, poetry, and biology. And politics is his major work. He on political philosophy, and his other works are also included this Nicomachean Ethics and Organon. These are not very much important from political science perspective. This Nicomachean Ethics, if you are someone preparing for UPSC, then ethics chapter, the ethics paper, in that the 2 units you will be reading about Aristotle's view on ethics. So we will be addressing only politics as his major work. So, in politics, there is a controversy around it, and you might understand what's controversy because they say that this was not originally written by Aristotle. Okay, one of the views says this was actually an edited works by students. That politics is edited works by students on Aristotle's opinions. Like they are randomly collected. Like Aristotle was giving a lecture, they thought it's nice. Let us write it down. Then the other one says politics is a collection of notes of students. Same thing, it's a running notes of the lectures he was delivering in the school, as we all know. So those lectures were compiled together and made as a book, Politics, because if you look into it, the chapters are little unedited. The original politics book I'm talking about. Chapters are little here and there. There's no starting and the ending point. They were just randomly come up. The titles randomly come up, and the subunits would come up from nowhere. So other influences on Aristotle was prevailing anarchy. As we all know, the philosophers are made of the times they live in. And in Athens, anarchy in Athens, so we all know, and Greek philosophy and perfect marriage life. This is an interesting one. He had a very perfect marriage life. He thought, okay, he criticized Plato's theory of communism, wife, and property solely because he had a very perfect life. If someone is denied of their marriage life, children, or withholding a property, that would be restricting their liberty and freedom. So this his marriage life in general made him influenced to write theories in particular, and also scientific approach by his father. He was taught how to approach things because his father works. So then influence of Plato and Aristotle, we all know he spent his prime age, the learning age, in Plato's academy, but he was also critical of him. We know he's the biggest Platonist, but also biggest critic. So according to Foster, Aristotle is the greatest Platonist of all. And to Barker, if Aristotle wrote politics and arranged them or segregated them, this would be most of them are influenced by Plato's ideals because he grew up uh, understanding or criticizing Plato. So, according to Dunning, Aristotle differs from Plato in form and method than in substance of his thoughts. Yeah, because Aristotle follows scientific approach, Plato follows the idealistic approach. Plato's are based on uh, the ideas, not the real life experiences, but Aristotle would want to keep it most of them as history or real life experiences. Then Plato's theory of forms helped him develop logic because he says ideas doesn't matter, the real object matters. So that's where logic comes in. Then he rejected theory of forms on two bases, as it seeks to identify particular with general and identifies properties as otherworldly. Yeah, he says the idea which we are talking about, the horse must has to be an horse. The idea of it being a horse doesn't really make any sense. He says gives counter to Plato. So his theory of state. So to Aristotle, state is a moral institutions and it should be the moral authority. And state is a place where individual attains the greatest sufficiency or the greatest standards. So he says state is a product of family system because smaller families in a larger sense form states, and state is formed by desires and interests of people. Okay, so best possible state is achievable. He doesn't say that it's not achievable if all people come together and their best desires are put forward. They can their family systems, if it's intact, they can form a best possible state. Also, he gives five elements which are uh, plays a role in forming this best possible state. First is population, size of the state, character of the people, classes in state, and education. He doesn't talk about how much the population has to be or the size of the state. Just like Plato in the previous lesson, he comes up with a magical number of 1050. But he doesn't talk about how much the population should be. He says the population should be the minimum where everybody is self-sufficient and should not uh, form a burden on the state. So his book Politics is a combination of 8 books, as we spoke in previous slides, that it is either running notes of students or either their collection of his lectures. So this book 1 is about slavery and all the treaties. Book 2 is about Plato's ideal state. He actually gave this entire book to Plato's ideal state, criticizing it. Then book 3 is monarchy and his views on monarchy and citizenship. Book 4 is about forms of government, and book 5 and 6 is democracy, oligarchy, again the forms of government. Book 7 is about constitution of an ideal state, and 8 is discourses on process of state. You can remember all these things. If you are not good at remembering, then you can go for what is book 2. Then his book 4 mentions forms of government, then oligarchy and democracy, because these are all the important things where Aristotle views are expressed very widely. Then classification of governments. So he classified governments. Aristotle is the first one who to scientifically analyze things and study the comparison between various constitutions and the various governments. This classification is used till date, and its validity is proven till date. We still understand how important it is to compare all the constitutions, all the governments, or various other states. So his classification of governments are based on two principles. One is number of persons who exercise power, like number of people who are ruling the government, and what is the purpose of power of government, what is their main agenda. So this two uh, variables led to an outcome of 3 pure form and 3 corrupt form. Okay, so total 6 kinds of governments has come up. So he said polity is the best practiced one. Then Aristotle believes in cycle of political change. As we know, in the coming slides, we'll be reading about Aristotle views on revolution. So Aristotle's cycle of change, he says monarchy leads to tyranny, then tyranny leads to aristocracy, aristocracy to oligarchy, oligarchy to polity, democracy, then democracy will come up in a cycle and will again lead to monarchy. So cycle of political change, this is an important MCQ. Then 6 kinds of government. Then what is the best practice is polity for him. So this slide you have to revise and revise and revise. It's very important. Then criticism to this theory. Of course, if there's a theory, then there has to be a criticism to it. So because he do not widely consider various constitution, he went only for the city state or the Greek city states. So he considers democracy as a perverted form, and it offers classification of governments, not states, because he looks into the view of the government, the ultimate authority that's been formed, but not that what state it is of. So the bigger state, the smaller states. And these are not based on scientific principle. These are just based on the outcome that he has seen through. It is more quantitative than qualitative. So as we know, he just divided it based on 2 variables only, and the outcome is of 6 kinds of government. So it's more quantitative. It's more number based than analyzing like what could be the outcome if not this. So next is about ideal state. So in book 2, 3, and 7, he talks about political ideas. Then 4, 5, 6 talks about political activities. So what is ideal state? Aristotle's ideal state is Plato's second best state, which was mentioned in the laws. So small city state with ideal population. So here he gave no number. If there's a question, Aristotle ideal state should contain the number as 1040 or 1020 or 800 or 999 or 500 or 0 or no number. So he did not give any number for it. So here laws of predominant, not the ideas or not the human beings. So it's an ideal state is an ethical institution of moral changes. So where human being grows ethically and morally, it's an highest institution, and it must be the state education. But the state education is only to the citizens. Will come in the next slides who are citizens according to him. Then he gave his opinion. he gave a right to property, unlike Plato, who said private property must be not given to the philosopher king, must be denied. Then division of labor is done based on their status of citizenship. So in ideal state, agriculturalists, artisans are considered as slaves, and commerce and traders are resident allies because they are outsiders mostly. And he gave political functions to citizens because citizens only should vote, citizens only should look into the political functions of the state. Because he says only the citizens should know what his state wants. So, and also it concentrates on its development and not aggressive towards its enemy. He says the expansion is necessary, but not necessarily you have to be aggressive towards your enemy state. You have to try maintaining peace mostly in your state. Then he says that it should be dominated by the middle class. Then the question arises, why middle class? Like, why did he go for that? He says the middle class are obedient and they can take the commands easily. They do not question the institution. So that's why he says it should be dominated by the middle class. And the ideal state must have access to the sea. Why? Because due to imports, exports of the country needs, and also possesses a temperate climate. Okay, he says not to extreme climates. Then citizens should show spirituality and courage. They should be courageous and also have spiritual institutions, belief in spiritual institutions. Because he say if a person doesn't fear anything, they're hard to be taking commands. Then who are citizens? So citizens are warlike, leisure, priests and administratives. So citizens belong to this criteria. They fight war, leisures and priests and administratives. Then agriculture and artisans are slaves according to him. Then his views on citizenship, slavery and private property. So interestingly, if a question comes, did Aristotle justify slavery? Answer is yes. He justified slavery and he gave explanation to it. He says slavery is natural. It's not man-made. So as it is natural, so I justify it and it is useful. Why? Because if there are slaves who can look into your works, you can focus, like the citizen can focus on political institutions. That's why they need slave. Then they are expedient. Slaves are living positions and hereditary. He also gives this concept of hereditary notion to the slaves. And who are slaves? You might come up with this question. Who are naturally like hereditary, then war prisoners, then mentally unstable people are also considered as slaves. Then who are all denied citizenship? This is also a question. Slaves are denied citizenship. Resident allies are denied citizenship. Women are denied citizenship. Plato, if we see, he's the first feminist. Aristotle is not. So he also denies citizenship to children, old people, and mentally ill people. He gave an explanation for it. These women do not have private property, so are dependent on their spouses. So the person who are dependent on the other person does not have reason or the moral uh, condition to look or vote what might be good for the state. Then children, because they are small, they are too dependent. And old people, they are also dependent on their children or the other people for their daily needs. So they are not in a position to vote or look into administrative things. Then he says who has right to vote? Only the citizens. So he denied right to vote for women, old people, resident allies, and slaves. So, and administration of justice and legislative work also. So property is good for individual and society. He is a staunch supporter of holding property. Why? Because it gives motivation to people in order to be properly functioning or doing their duties. The division of labor shall be done properly in the state. And also it gives them a sense of self-respect that they are the true owners of their property, and self-love and civic responsibilities. So he also gave three methods of property to own. This is owned by some but used by all. Then common ownership and common use. Then everybody can own that property and everybody can use that. Then common ownership but only private use. Everybody can own it but only some can use it. So he gives the two types to this property. So one is animate and inanimate types. Animate are slaves. Inanimate are properties which gives them happiness. Example like a home. Like after doing a work outside, they would wish to go to a place which gives them peace. So wealth is divided into natural and unnatural. So he says he gives priority to private property, right? He also gives restrictions that this property must be as per your need. You cannot simply keep on get buying or keep on occupying the property which could be not useful to you. So how much is needed, that much only must be acquired. So he says wealth is divided into natural. Natural is cattle rearing, agriculture and hunting. Unnatural is trade, barter system, commerce. So on revolution is an important thing. So theory of revolution, if they come up with a question, then you should write Aristotle, not the other political philosophers. Then 158 constitutions. He did a study on 158 constitution of Greek city-states. Remember this number, only number which Aristotle gave is 158 constitutions. Then he gives reasons why revolution happens, because natural desire of the people to be treated as equals. Because in the previous thing slides we see he did not give citizenship to everybody else, so he gave only to a particular class. So he also gives example like in a democracy, policy of demagogues is to attack rich and feed the poor. In a way, this rich can come together, or feed poor can come together and form uh, a group and a revolt against the state. So in oligarchy, the oligarch treated masses harshly. So this masses can come together and revolt against the head. So in aristocracy and politics, only the balances the elements and the constitution may change in unidirectional. So he proposes for this thing where there's a balance, there's not two extremities. So in the two tyrants of his times, you have to remember this. Hermix and Antipater are two tyrants of his times. And this revolution is a spirit of fairness, because people are fighting for the fairness, and it's a revolt against the oppression that they have been facing either in oligarchy or the democracy. So he says what the heads must do. They must do good in times of revolution, which could be stopped in controlling the revolution. And he also proposed to give no sudden rise of wealth of any social classes, because that would cause the imbalance in the state, and again it causes the revolution. Then no official should be allowed to accumulate wealth. Yes, because accumulation of wealth in the officials is going, it's a kind of the bribery or the corrupt methods, because they have authority. They can accumulate the huge number of huge wealth in huge numbers. So Democrats should also protect the rich in order to stop the revolution. And oligarchs should encourage and help people. See, here he says oligarchy treats masses harshly, and in democracy, the demagogues attack rich and feed poor. So in order to stop the revolution, he says there should be a balance. So how that balance can be improved? He says Democrats should also protect the rich, and oligarchs shall encourage the poor people. Then to him, justice is of two types. One is complete justice, and other one is particular justice. So justice to Plato is righteousness. So here for him it is moral virtues in maintaining public and social relationships, and distribution of wealth and offices. This is complete justice. This is from the institution perspective. Then the particular justice, the second type, is also again divided into two types. One is distributive and the next one is corrective. Distributive is allocation of offices. This is a political privilege. Who can be given this political privilege? Only citizens. So this is done among citizens. This proportional allocation must be done. One shall not hold the whole office because that might lead to aristocracy or the monarch or ruled by few. So then corrective justice is a negative justice. So negative states is redistribution of wealth to those who are lost due to social injustices. So if they ask redistribution of wealth to those who had lost due to social injustice is Aristotle's idea of corrective justice. Then, okay, we'll summarize him. What did he do? He contributed to rule of law, then sovereignty of law. He actually in favor of slavery and denied equality to women. So he's not feminist. If there's a question comes, then moderation and attachment. He's a moderatist. So we all know he's not a radical. So he always goes for middle path, mean that only can avoid revolution. He says revolution is not avoided. So in order to avoid that revolution, one must follow a balance. The institutions must follow balance. The heads must follow balance. He's an individualist and also laid foundation for the comparative methods, the 158 constitutions that we have read. So that comparative method is valid till date since the centuries. And also he emphasizes on supremacy of law, not supremacy of a one human being. Then constitutionalism and natural origin of state, because state is an institution formed through family as an institution as a whole. And also it calls for principle of maximum happiness as of maximum number of people. So later on this theory was further developed by Bentham. You can see in utilitarianism in coming lessons. Then he's also influenced by Montesquieu's separation of powers. So here we can see he separated this here in the previous slide. He says proportional allocation of offices as per worth. Means what? Division of power, right? So powers must be divided as per the need. So the next one, okay, yeah, he's father of modern conservatives. And to him, polity is the best practicable and middle class state. As we know, he wished for middle class population should be higher because they are obedient and command taking. So he moved from particular to general, deductive methods. And thank you. See you all in next class.